The stars burned red. The Kethari Alliance, once proud defenders of 100 worlds, was collapsing. Their fleets drifted like broken metal across the void. Enemy ships filled the skies like dark swarms of locusts, tearing through cities and space stations without mercy. Every distress signal the Kethari sent echoed through space. But no one answered. The Galactic Council, once full of proud promises and speeches, had fled. The nearby empires closed their borders, too afraid to interfere. And the name that everyone whispered with fear spread across the galaxy again: the Vorn Dominion. They were not conquerors. They were exterminators. They didn't take prisoners. They erased entire civilizations to make room for their own kind. On the flagship Kethar's Pride, Admiral Tarek stood on the bridge, surrounded by smoke and chaos. His uniform was torn, the walls around him cracked and sparking. A holographic map showed his fleet shrinking, ships disappearing one after another. He clenched his jaw. "How many planets remain?" he asked. A young officer, her hands trembling, replied softly, "Only 3, sir. The Vorn are pushing into the core systems. We can't hold them." Tarek turned his eyes toward the burning planet below. It had once been the jewel of their empire. Now it was a field of fire. The enemy's message came through again, repeating in every language, "Surrender. Your worlds will burn either way." The crew stared at the transmission in silence. Everyone knew what it meant. The Vorn never lied about their intentions. They would destroy them all. For the first time in centuries, the Kethari people felt true despair. No help would come. No ancient ally, no forgotten promise. Tarek lowered his head. "Send one last signal," he said quietly. "To anyone. To everyone. Even if they don't listen." The communication officer nodded and activated the transmitter. A weak signal pulsed into the void. An old frequency used during the Alliance's earliest wars, one that reached deep into forgotten corners of the galaxy. Then, there was only silence. Hours passed. The Vorn fleet moved closer. Tarek knew it was the end. Far away, on the edge of known space, an old Terran relay station floated silently among asteroids. It had been abandoned for decades, left running only by ancient AI subroutines. Its sensors flickered to life when the Kethari signal arrived. A red light blinked on the console. Then another. The signal was weak, distorted, and old, but the machine understood the code. It forwarded the message along the Terran network, and on Earth, deep under the mountains of the Terran Defense Command, a long-forgotten alarm came alive. Inside a dark control room, officers stared at the glowing display. The signal was marked Allied Distress Protocol, Class Extinction. Commander Elise Ward, who had served through the last border conflict decades ago, stepped closer. She frowned. "This frequency hasn't been used since the old wars," she murmured. Her assistant looked at her nervously. "Ma'am, the Council forbade us from responding to alien distress calls after the Accord of Silence." Elise didn't answer at first. She watched the repeating message. Images of burning worlds, desperate Kethari voices calling for help. She remembered the stories from the last war, when humans had fought beside the Kethari and saved them from annihilation once before. She remembered the cost. The lives lost, the worlds destroyed, and she remembered why Earth had chosen to stay silent afterward. But still, something inside her wouldn't let her ignore it. "Elise," said another officer quietly, "this isn't our fight." She turned sharply toward him. "It wasn't our fight the first time either," she said. "But we didn't watch them die then." "We won't now." The room fell silent. The old machines hummed, waiting for her command. Finally, Elise spoke. "Open the old war channels." The officer hesitated. "Ma'am, those systems haven't been used in 30 years. The fleet—" "If they're still out there," she interrupted, "they'll know what this means." Somewhere far from Earth, deep in the shadow of Neptune, massive shapes began to stir. Old warships, retired Terran dreadnoughts, sat hidden in icy orbits forgotten by most of the galaxy. Their hulls were black as the void, their engines cold for decades. Now one by one they began to wake. Power surged through their systems. Engines rumbled. Ancient AI cores came online, recognizing the activation code, Operation Phoenix. Across the fleet, lights flickered to life. Weapons charged, and a single transmission left Earth's command network, carried on secure channels that no alien could intercept. It was short, but every ship knew what it meant. Prepare for deployment. Humanity intervenes. In the distant Cathari system, Admiral Tarek stood on his bridge watching the enemy fleet advance. The last of their defenses were falling. His crew waited for the final command, to fight or to surrender. Then suddenly his radar officer shouted, "Sir, new signatures detected. Unknown ships entering the system." Tarek's heart sank. He thought it was more Vorn reinforcements. But then the readings came clearer. Different transponder codes, unknown configuration, and in that moment, a faint voice echoed through every Cathari channel. "This is the Terran Defense Fleet. To all Cathari forces, hold position. You are not alone." Tarek froze. He stared at the signal. The name, the voice, the humans. It couldn't be. Not after all these years, yet the voice was real. And for the first time in a long, long while, the Admiral felt hope. Hook End. A quiet voice in the Terran command room said the words that would change everything. If they're still out there, they'll know what this means. And in the silence of space, humanity began to move once again. The unexpected war had begun. On Earth, few remembered the Cathari anymore. Their name was a fading whisper from the old war, a war that had nearly broken humanity. The galaxy had moved on. Trade routes reopened, new treaties formed, and humans were quietly pushed to the edge of every conversation. The Galactic Council had called them Deathworlders. Too violent. Too unpredictable. Too human. After the Terran fleets disappeared from the stars, the galaxy sighed in relief. No one asked where they went. No one dared, but now, someone had called them again. Inside the Terran Defense Command, deep beneath layers of rock and silence, Commander Elise Ward stood before the main holo display. The old Cathari distress signal played on loop. Faded voices begged for aid. Explosions flared in the background. Most of the younger officers in the room had never seen a real alien before. To them, the Cathari were just stories, tall beings with scaled skin and glowing eyes. To Elise, they were friends, and their faces in that recording brought back memories she had tried to bury. She clenched her fists. The younger lieutenant beside her cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "the council forbade contact after the Accord of Silence. If we respond, we violate—" Elise cut him off sharply. "If we ignore it, we watch a species die." Her voice echoed in the control room. The room went still. The officer hesitated. "With respect, Commander, Earth is not ready for another war." Elise turned her eyes toward the holographic stars. "Neither are they," she whispered, "but they're fighting anyway." Far across the system, inside Luna Command, old war bunkers came alive for the first time in decades. Red emergency lights blinked as AI cores rebooted. Ancient Terran satellites began transmitting encrypted signals, jumping from one relay to the next. Code lines that hadn't been touched since the Battle of Vega Prime started running again. Operation Phoenix had been activated in orbit. A single black-hulled cruiser, the TSS Vindicator, drifted like a ghost above the moon. Its crew had been in cryosleep for 20 years, kept alive for one reason only: if the old war ever returned. Now, alarms echoed through the ship as pods opened. Frozen soldiers gasped for air, their breath fogging in the dim blue light. Captain Ryan Holt stepped out of his chamber, his eyes still adjusting. A mechanical voice greeted him. "Captain Holt, you are reactivated under Article 7. Distress signal received. Target origin, Cathari Alliance." He blinked. "Cathari? After all this time?" The AI responded calmly. "Their civilization is under attack. Council forces are unresponsive." "Awaiting orders." Holt frowned. "Of course they're unresponsive," he muttered. "They always are." He walked to the bridge, brushing frost off the control panels. The stars beyond the viewport shimmered with cold light. "Signal Earth Command," he said. "Tell them the Vindicator is operational, and prepare the fleet. We're going back to work." Back on Earth, Elise Ward watched as hundreds of encrypted confirmations started appearing on her screen. Old ships hidden across moons, asteroids, and dark stations were waking up one by one. TSS Titan reporting ready. TSS Havoc online. Vindicator requesting jump coordinates. The Terran War Network was alive again. Elise couldn't help but smile. After all these years, after being forgotten and feared, humanity's old warriors were rising from the shadows. And somewhere in deep space, the enemy who thought the galaxy belonged to them was about to learn a very old lesson. Humans don't forget. They wait. Meanwhile, across the stars, the Vorn Dominion continued their conquest. The Ketheri homeworld of Valon was surrounded. Entire cities burned under orbital fire. Their navy, once powerful, was reduced to wreckage. On the ground, Admiral Tarek coordinated the last defense from a mountain bunker. He looked pale and exhausted, his uniform scorched. "Any word from the Council?" he asked weakly. His aide shook his head. "Nothing, sir. No one is coming." Tarek stared at the holomap showing the enemy fleet closing in. He whispered, "Then this is truly the end." The aide hesitated. "Sir, we did receive summit ID." The Ketheri homeworld, Valon, was burning. From orbit, the planet looked like a dying ember. Oceans glowing red, cities reduced to dust. The sky was filled with the black shapes of Vorn warships, circling like vultures waiting for their prey to stop moving. Inside a mountain command bunker, Admiral Tarek watched the chaos on the holomap. The last of their defense fleets was collapsing. The ground armies were scattered. He turned to his staff, voice low but steady. "Evacuate the civilians. Everyone who can fly, get them off-world." "Sir, there's nowhere left to go," one officer whispered. Tarek closed his eyes. He knew she was right. The bunker shook as another orbital blast hit the surface. The lights flickered. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and then the radar officer shouted, "Admiral!" New contacts, multiple signatures entering the system. Every head turned toward the screen. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe the Council had changed its mind. Maybe someone had finally answered. But as the data came through, the officer's voice trembled. "Unknown configuration. Not Council ships. Not Kethari. Not Vorn." Tarek stepped forward. His heart pounded as the symbols on the display resolved into something old, something familiar. "It couldn't be." "Run a deep scan," he ordered quickly. "Identify those ships." The computer processed the data, analyzing the heat signatures and energy spikes. Then, one by one, the names appeared in Terran code. TSS Vindicator. "TSS Titan, TSS Havoc." Tarek froze. He whispered, "No, it can't be them." But it was. Out in space, far beyond Valon's orbit, the Terran Expeditionary Fleet emerged from the jump. 17 warships, black and silent, their hulls reflecting no light. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't broadcast, they simply arrived, like ghosts returning from the dead. On the flagship TSS Resolute, Commander Elise Ward stood on the bridge, staring at the burning planet ahead. She had seen this sight before, long ago on another world. Her face hardened. "Target assessment," she said calmly. "Vorn Dominion fleet count: 3 carriers, 7 destroyers, 12 escorts. Ground bombardment in progress," the tactical officer reported. Elise nodded. "Open a channel." The comms officer hesitated. "To the Kethari, ma'am?" Her eyes narrowed. "No, to the Vorn." Moments later, every Vorn communication screen flickered. A Terran symbol, an old, almost mythical emblem, appeared. The sound of a calm human voice filled their decks. "This is Commander Elise Ward of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are violating Terran Military Code of Protection. Leave this system immediately, or face human retaliation." The Vorn commander, sitting comfortably on his flagship, laughed. "Terran, impossible. You went extinct decades ago." He turned to his crew. "Target those signals. Destroy them." The Vorn ships opened fire. Beams of plasma streaked across space toward the Terran formation. The human ships didn't move. They didn't even raise shields. Instead, they fired once. The silence of space shattered. From the Resolute, a line of brilliant light erupted, a kinetic slug traveling at a fraction of light speed. It passed through 2 enemy destroyers and split a carrier in half before the Vorn even registered what happened. The second shot came from the Vindicator, a gravity torpedo that folded space for a heartbeat, then tore 3 more ships apart in a silent explosion of light. Within 60 seconds, the entire Vorn front line was gone. Their flagship tried to retreat, engines flaring, and then the Titan moved. The Terran super dreadnought advanced slowly, firing rail batteries in perfect sequence. Each impact looked like a miniature supernova. When it was over, there was nothing left but drifting debris. On Valon, Admiral Tarek and his officers stared at the sky. Through the clouds and ash, they saw bright flashes above the atmosphere. Not bombardment, but explosions. The enemy fleet was gone. Tarek turned to his radar officer. "Confirm that. Are those readings correct?" The young officer's voice cracked. "Yes, sir. All enemy ships destroyed. New fleet remains in orbit. Energy signatures." Terran. The bunker erupted in disbelief. Some officers shouted, others wept. Tarek just stood there, unable to move. "They came," he whispered. "After all these years, they actually came back." In orbit, Commander Ward watched as her ships formed a protective line over Valon. "Status report?" she asked. "All hostiles neutralized. Civilian transmissions detected on the surface. They're calling for help." Elise nodded. "Then let's give it." Drop pods streaked toward the planet, not weapons but supplies and med teams. Human Marines in black armor landed in burning cities, guiding survivors to safety. The Cathari stared at them in shock. They had heard stories about humans, that they were monsters, that they destroyed everything they touched. But these soldiers fought with precision, efficiency, and mercy. Everywhere they landed, the Vorn fled. In the skies, a single Cathari pilot transmitted to the Terran flagship. "Unknown vessels. This is Valon Defense Command. Identify yourselves." A moment passed before a human voice replied. "We're the ones you called." "A long time ago." Hours later, Admiral Tarek was brought aboard the Resolute. He stood in awe at the sight of Terran technology. Cold metal, glowing blue corridors, quiet but powerful machinery. Commander Ward met him in the command chamber. She extended her hand. "Admiral Tarek, it's good to see a friend still standing." He looked at her with disbelief. "You came all this way." "For us," she smiled faintly. "You sent a call for help." "That's what we do." He shook his head. "You'll make enemies again. The Council will call this an act of aggression." Elise's eyes hardened. "Let them. The Council ran while your worlds burned. We don't answer to them." Outside, the Terran fleet began scanning the system for any remaining Vorn presence. The stars shimmered as more Terran ships jumped in. Reinforcements from deep space. Earth was moving again. And the galaxy was watching. Hookend. In a dark chamber across the galaxy, a Vorn warlord slammed his fist on the table. "Find out where they came from," he growled. Find Earth, because the war they thought was over had just begun. The sky above Kethar Prime was no longer blue. Ash clouds covered the light, and the air shook with the sound of orbital bombardments. The Vorn Dominion's warships hung in orbit like massive shadows, their plasma cannons burning the planet's cities one by one. Admiral Tarek stood inside the underground command bunker, his face illuminated by the dim red lights of emergency power. Every screen showed destruction. Every report ended the same way: no survivors. He looked at his officers, tired, defeated, covered in ash and blood. The Cathari people had fought bravely, but everyone knew it was over. Then suddenly one of the comms officers gasped. "Sir, signal detected." Unknown origin coming through old Council frequencies. Tarek turned sharply. "Put it through." The static hissed for several seconds. Then, a calm, deep human voice filled the bunker. "This is the Terran Expeditionary Command. To all surviving Cathari forces, hold your positions. Reinforcements are en route." The room went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The young officer blinked in disbelief. "Reinforcements? From where?" "The Council is gone. No one's coming." But Tarek knew that voice. He remembered it from old Alliance archives, from the war decades ago when the humans first joined galactic politics. That same tone had been heard in dozens of recorded battles, and every time that voice spoke, the tide of war changed. He slowly stood, his eyes wide. "It's them," he whispered. "The humans." Above the planet, space began to ripple. At first, the Vorn commanders thought it was a sensor glitch, some atmospheric distortion caused by the bombardment. But then their instruments went dark. Every system on their ships flickered, jammed, and froze. One by one, massive black shapes appeared out of the void. No bright lights, no grand banners, just silent, enormous Terran warships sliding into formation like a wall of shadows. Each ship carried the old Terran insignia, a blue planet surrounded by stars. The Vorn fleet's admiral tried to open a channel. "Identify yourselves. You are entering Dominion." His voice cut off mid-sentence. A beam of white light shot across space, tearing straight through his flagship. The explosion lit up the orbit like a small sun. The other Vorn ships panicked, scattering in every direction. But there was nowhere to run. The Terrans moved with machine-like precision, each strike surgical, each volley silent and merciless. In less than 7 minutes, the entire Vorn invasion fleet above Cathar Prime was gone. Not damaged. Not disabled. Gone. On the ground, Tarek and his crew watched in disbelief. The sensor screens showed enemy signatures vanishing one after another, faster than they could count. "Who are these people?" whispered one Cathari officer. Tarek exhaled slowly. "They're not people. They're humans." Minutes later, a message came through the bunker's comm system. The same calm Terran voice said, "Admiral Tarek, this is Captain Elias of the Terran warship Resolute. Your skies are clear. Begin surface recovery. We'll handle orbit." Tarek felt his knees weaken. For the first time in months, he smiled. He couldn't believe it after all the death, all the despair. Someone had actually come. He pressed the transmitter and spoke quietly. "This is Admiral Tarek of the Cathari Defense Command. We thought no one was left to hear us." There was a pause. Then Elias replied, "We heard you, and we don't abandon allies." Above the planet, the Terran fleet moved deeper into the Vorn sector. No speeches. No broadcasts. Just cold, focused silence. Every Terran captain knew their orders. Drive the Dominion back to their homeworld. As the Cathari survivors climbed out of their bunkers, they saw St. The Vorn Dominion had never known fear. For centuries, their fleets had conquered every world they saw. No army could stop them. No empire dared challenge them. Until now. Reports spread across their territories, entire fleets disappearing without a trace, outposts going silent, worlds cut off from communication. At first, the Vorn High Command called it rumors. Then came the images. Footage from their own satellites showed it clearly. Black Terran warships moving through the void like shadows, destroying everything in their path with terrifying precision. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't broadcast demands. They just arrived, and silence followed. Inside the Vorn capital fortress, Supreme Commander Dravik stood before the central war map. Every red light represented a Dominion stronghold. One by one, they blinked out. He slammed his clawed hand on the console. "Find them! Find the Terran fleet!" But the officers trembled. Their scanners found nothing. Every trace of Terran movement vanished seconds after detection, as if the humans were ghosts. "They're using stealth fields beyond our understanding, Commander," said one officer quietly. "Their ships don't emit energy trails. It's like they don't exist." Dravik bared his teeth. "No one is invisible. Bring me their leader's head." Across the stars on the Terran flagship Resolute, Captain Elias watched as their fleet prepared for another strike. The target, Vorn Fortress Station 9, a massive orbital foundry that built Dominion warships. Beside him, a young lieutenant looked nervous. "Sir, their station is heavily shielded. We can't get through without risking the fleet." Elias didn't look away from the screen. His tone was calm. "Then we won't break through it." He pressed a command key. "Launch ghost drones." Outside the Resolute, dozens of tiny silver drones detached from the hull and disappeared into the blackness. They were invisible to sensors, carrying nothing but pure chaos. Minutes later, explosions bloomed from inside the Vorn station itself. The fortress-owned reactors turned against it. Within seconds, the giant structure tore itself apart. The humans never fired a single cannon. From orbit, Vorn civilians watched the destruction of their own shipyards. They had always believed themselves safe, protected by the Dominion's power. Now they saw Terran warships floating silently above the wreckage, symbols of judgment. Some Vorn began to flee to the outer colonies. Others begged their commanders to surrender, but the Dominion's leaders refused. "We will fight to the last ship," they roared. The humans seemed to hear it and responded not with words but with action. One by one, the Terran fleet struck deeper. Vorn planets went dark. Their fleets tried ambushes, traps, and massed assaults, but none worked. Terran ships used strange jump patterns, appearing behind enemy lines as if they had read the Dominion's plans before they were made. It wasn't just power. It was intelligence. Every move the Vorn made. Humanity was already waiting. Meanwhile, the Cathari alliance watched from afar. Admiral Tarek stood before the hollow map, watching entire enemy sectors collapse. He turned to his officers and said quietly, "This isn't a counterattack. This is an extermination." A communications tech looked up. "Sir, do you think the Terrans will stop once the Dominion is gone?" Tarek didn't answer immediately. He thought about the calm, cold voice he'd heard from Captain Elias. Finally, he said, "I don't think they came here for conquest. They came because someone called for help." He paused, then added, "But once they start something, they finish it." Far from the main battle in a small asteroid base, a group of Vorn survivors watched in horror as their systems picked up a Terran transmission. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. Just a single repeating message, cold and mechanical. "For every world you burned, we will burn one of yours. For every ally you killed, we will erase your fleets. This is not war. This is balance." The survivors stared at the screen in silence. One of them whispered, "They sound like machines." Another replied softly, "No, machines don't get angry." A few days later, Terran Command broadcast its first public message to the galaxy. Simple words sent on every open frequency. "This is Earth. The Cathari are safe. The Dominion has been warned. If you threaten the weak, you answer to us." The message spread faster than light, replayed across every network, every empire, every council world. And in that moment, the galaxy remembered why humans were once called Death Worlders. They didn't start wars, but when pushed too far, they ended them. Hookend. In the Vorn capital, Commander Dravik stood before the last defense line, a ring of 1,000 warships. His aide whispered, trembling, "Sir." Terran ships detected, thousands of them. Dravik turned toward the dark horizon, and there, blotting out the stars, he saw them, an entire Terran armada, silent and unstoppable, approaching like the end of days. He whispered, "What are they?" And the aide replied softly, "Humans, the ones who came when everyone else ran." The Vorn capital world, Dravenar, was a planet built for war. Mountains were carved into fortresses, oceans filled with shipyards, and the skies burned with defense grids stronger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. For 1,000 years, no enemy had even reached its orbit. But now, the stars above Dravenar were gone. Blotted out by thousands of black Terran ships, they didn't announce themselves. They didn't issue any demand for surrender. They simply arrived, and every Vorn warrior who looked to the sky understood. This was the reckoning they had brought upon themselves. In the main control tower, Supreme Commander Dravik watched the incoming armada. His claws dug into the metal railing until sparks flew. How can one species do this?" he whispered. No one answered. His officers were frozen, staring at the massive Terran warships in orbit. Some of those ships were larger than cities. Some were covered in strange, shifting armor that shimmered like liquid metal, and in the center of the fleet floated a single vessel, twice the size of any other. Its hull bore a single word in white lettering, Earth. Inside that ship's command bridge, Captain Elias stood silently. His eyes were fixed on the planet below. Around him, Terran officers worked with quiet precision. There was no celebration, no anger, no joy, just calm purpose. "Fleet status?" Elias asked. "All ships in position, sir," replied the officer. "No resistance detected yet," Elias nodded. "Transmit one message to the surface," a voice echoed across the planet, reaching every Vorn communication channel, every military frequency, every civilian broadcast. It said only 3 words, "Your war ends." Then the skies opened. Terran kinetic bombardment began, metal rods falling at hypersonic speed from orbit. They didn't explode. They punched through the surface like the fist of a god. Entire fortress mountains turned into vapor. War factories vanished. Oceans boiled. The Vorn fought back with everything they had. Planetary cannons, missile storms, entire fleets rising from the surface. But nothing touched the Terran ships. Their shields absorbed the attacks like rain. Within minutes, every orbital defense was gone. Commander Dravik screamed orders, but no one listened. The capital's communications were filled with cries, soldiers begging for help, cities reporting destruction, civilians trying to escape. For the first time in his life, Dravik felt powerless. "Tell them we surrender," he shouted. But the Terrans didn't reply. The bombardment continued, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Hours later, the flames faded. The mighty capital of the Dominion, once called the Eternal Fortress, was now a silent wasteland of ash and glass. From orbit, Terran drones moved through the debris, searching for survivors. They didn't find many. Captain Elias stood on the Earth's command deck, watching the ruined world on his screen. His expression didn't change. A young officer approached carefully. "Sir, the Dominion is finished." "Orders?" Elias finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire bridge. "Begin relief drops for civilians. Deploy medical teams." "No more killing," the officer blinked. "Sir?" Elias looked at him and said, "We came to end a war, not to become monsters." Word of the fall of Dravenar spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, the unthinkable had happened. The most feared empire had been destroyed, not by politics, not by diplomacy, but by humans. The Galactic Council, once cowardly and silent, now sent urgent messages of peace and cooperation. Every empire wanted to speak with Earth. Every government wanted an alliance, but Earth said nothing. Their fleets simply turned around and disappeared into deep space, leaving behind only one message on an open channel. "We do not seek conquest. We seek balance. The next time you hear a distress call, don't ignore it." Back on Kethar Prime, Admiral Tarek stood with his people watching the night sky. High above, faint white trails marked where the Terran fleet had left orbit. He whispered, "They didn't come for glory. They came because we asked." His second-in-command nodded. "Do you think they'll ever return?" Tarek smiled faintly. "Only if we're foolish enough to need saving again." Weeks later, on Earth in a quiet command bunker, Captain Elias stood before the Terran Defense Council. "Mission completed," he reported simply. An older general asked, "And the Dominion?" Elias replied, "You gone. Their worlds are free." The general nodded slowly. "And the message?" Elias looked at the stars through the viewing window and said, "They heard it. Hook end. Final line." Out in the dark between the stars, ancient listening stations flickered to life. Distress signals that once went ignored were now answered by a single coded transmission. Signal received. "This is Earth. Help is on the way. And across the galaxy, a